Coming up on The Cost of Living.
This is really about who controls our society, right? Because this is the first major case against a big tech firm, but really against any big business, brought by the Department of Justice in 25 years, since the Microsoft case. And the question here is fundamentally, do we allow a small group of people to control the internet?
We Google stuff every day. The company is so dominant, it's a verb. That's good for Google. But is it good for us? Hi, I'm Paul Havershood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. Google processes 99,000 queries a second. When it comes to the search engine game, its market share is more than 90%. A U.S. court says it got there by hard work, innovation, and, oh yeah, being a monopoly. It's being called a landmark ruling, but could it really change how we use the internet? Also today, what viral personal finance trend is the opposite of keeping up with the Joneses? Loud budgeting. It's telling the Joneses, and anyone else who will listen, exactly how much you're not spending. Up first, summer vibes. It's like the Fresh Prince said, time to sit back and unwind. Or maybe wander like Wordsworth, beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Anything but think about the economy. But even if you're not thinking about it, it's still thinking of you. Let's talk about the state of the economy. Yeah, it's the dog days of August, but the economy waits for no one. It just keeps economying along. And things are afoot. Like interest rates. They've gone down not once, but twice. The reason they shot up, of course, was to get a handle on inflation. So now that they're going down, is this it? Break out the streamers? Is the inflation battle won?
No, not yet. So there has been a big moderation in inflation, which is extremely welcome news. There's no question about that.
Okay, so Jean-Francois Perrault, Scotiabank's chief economist, says inflation isn't done yet, but it's at 2.7%. Wrestling it down is no longer the be-all and end-all for the Bank of Canada. It can worry about other stuff. And right now, that other stuff is the economy at large. It's sluggish. Economic growth looks like it will be around 1% this year. That's not exactly a recession, but it's maybe a little too close for comfort. Cutting interest rates is the bank's way of giving the economy a little kick.
So there is clear evidence that the economy has been slowing. There's no question about that. It's not slowed as much as we would have thought would have been the case, but it's still not a strong economy. And of course, as you combine that slower economy with lower inflation, it does give the Bank of Canada significant room to cut interest rates, and they're doing that.
So here's where things stand. Inflation was the main event for years. The bank jacked up interest rates, and inflation is calming down. That economic pendulum, though, it's always swinging. Those same higher rates could be squeezing the economy too much. So the Bank of Canada figures it's time to loosen things up, inject a little more cash into the economy. It cut rates by 1/4 point in June, and followed that with another cut in July. That puts interest rates at 4.5%. The hope is this will juice the economy. The fear is that lower rates could light a fire back under inflation.
There are some things on the inflation front that remain worrisome. And some things that we know were an inflation issue a couple of years ago. So one of those things in particular is the increase in shipping costs. So because of the problems in the Red Sea, the Panama Canal, there has been a very significant increase in shipping costs around the world. We look at, the housing market, rent increases. Those are still a problem. The inflation battle isn't won. There still is a chance that inflation, goes the wrong way. And that as a result of that, we find ourselves in a more challenging situation a few months from now.
You're not nearly as sanguine about inflation as I was hoping you were going to be, honestly, when I asked that question. I was like, hey, we're cutting rates. All right. Prices are coming down. Let's go.
I'd love to be super sanguine, but, the challenge is if you're overly confident about what happens on the inflation front and you set policy on that account and then you're wrong from a central bank perspective, that creates a lot of issues. So there is a bit of value in taking your time to make sure that inflation really does go down in the way that you want it to over the next several months.
Let's say inflation does keep going down. If that happens, Jean-Francois says interest rates will likely keep falling too. He expects rates to be around 3% by the end of next year. Other economists think a slowing economy will need even more help, so rates could go even lower, like 2.25%. What would those kinds of cuts mean for anyone with a mortgage?
Well, it's pretty meaningful, right? I mean, of course, it depends on the size of the mortgage, depends on when you're renewing. But, you're probably talking for the typical mortgage owner several $100s in mortgage payment relief. And that's, that is not inconsequential. That is a substantial reduction in mortgage payments relative to what otherwise would be the case.
So mortgage holders could be about to catch a break. As for the housing market at large, well, when rates start to fall in this country, we know what happens to house prices.
It's very clear that as mortgage rates come down, it's easier to qualify for mortgages. Folks can get a little bit more active in the mortgage space, that we will see a significant pickup in housing market activity. So stronger sales a few months from now, next year. And with that should come higher prices because there is still this fundamental challenge in Canada of just not enough homes relative to the amount of homeowners or households that there are. You can't get around that. Like that's just a kind of a fundamental law of economics.
If rates go down, will the housing market heat up? What about inflation? Does the bank need to cut rates to avoid a recession? These are the kind of business as usual questions our economy faces on the regular. But something is also looming that could be anything but regular. The U.S. election. Depending on how that goes, everything we're talking about could be, trumped.
If you listen to former President Trump talking about the things that he wants to do if he wins, were he to do those things, it would be injurious to the U.S., it would be hurtful to Canada and the rest of the world. Now, the odds of him winning seem to be shifting. We'll see how that plays out. But there is a world in which, he does win and he does, fulfill the promises that he has made. And those, are things like cutting taxes in the U.S., which would be good for the Americans, a little bit of a competitive challenge for us, but higher inflation resulting from that. The big thing is, tariffs on everybody. Tariffs of 10% on anything coming into the U.S. That includes stuff from Canada, even though we have a trade deal with them.
If Trump wins for Canada, all bets could be off. They're our biggest trading partner. We're the proverbial mouse riding an elephant. Just think about the U.S. slapping on a 10% across-the-board tariff.
So tariffs are basically their tax on imports, right? So you're making the cost of producing things more expensive. So Americans put a tariff of 10% on Canadian goods going into the U.S. It's almost certainly going to be the case that Canada would retaliate as well, right? We're not just going to take this. We're going to try and dissuade the Americans from doing it. So you put tariffs of your own. So that means higher inflation. It means the higher cost of producing things. It is bad for growth because all of a sudden we have, less income to spend things are more expensive. So you got less kind of real income in a sense.
Yeah, inflationary tariffs, they mean those interest rate cuts we're expecting? Maybe not. Now, if Kamala Harris ends up in the White House, Jean-Francois expects more continuity. She is part of the Biden administration. She'll bring her own policy, sure, but Canada will likely avoid the economic dramatics that could come with a Trump win. The unknowns of the U.S. election aside, Jean-Francois does see plenty of reasons to feel okay. Inflation is down. The Bank of Canada is cutting rates. So are other countries. This should give the global economy a boost. Maybe we'll even get on a little roll.
That's kind of the optimistic base case for the next little while. You get a lot of rate relief or some rate relief. People feel a lot better about themselves, about their financial situation. And that leads to, some return of economic activity, some return of optimism, some, a bit more liberty on the personal financial side relative to the challenges that we've experienced the last couple of years.
return of optimism. It's almost like we need to whisper that. We don't want to spook it. So yeah, no streamers, but maybe we can allow ourselves just one little hopeful This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Who says the kids don't know the value of a dollar? Just look at viral personal finance trends like loud budgeting. It's the fiscally prudent cousin of girl math and quiet quitting. In a story that first aired earlier this year, our producer Ellis Cho finds the idea of loud budgeting goes deeper than just a hashtag.
Loud budgeting is a new concept I'm introducing for 2024. It's the opposite of quiet luxury. But if you
A few weeks ago, Lucas Battle started talking about loud budgeting on TikTok. Since then, hashtag loud budgeting has had more than 10 million views.
It's not I don't have enough, it's I don't want to spend, okay? Put that dollar in your pocket, choose a stock that's going to rock it.
Kinda just sounds like saving, right? The difference is that with loud budgeting, you're openly talking about your financial decisions. You're not going out for drinks tonight because you're saving. And this resonates with a lot of Gen Zs and millennials, like Melanie Trottier.
I love it. I think that, again, speaking about our finances and what we value, it's like this practice and like even personal development of really owning who you are and what you value.
She posts what she spends every month on social media, everything from rent and groceries to clothes and coffee. And when she's asked to do something she can't afford,
I'll definitely be open and honest with them and just let them know that it's not in the budget this month. And everyone has responded well to it.
Melanie started posting her budget to help her manage her own finances. And she hopes that by talking about it openly, it helps others.
Tracking it, I get a lot of fulfillment just knowing exactly where I am, how much money is coming in, how much money is going out, so that I can be really aware. And then sharing it, I really enjoy when people, validate me and say thank you for sharing this and, destigmatizing talking about money.
Talking about money is still kind of taboo. Most of us don't talk about our salaries or what we blow our hard-earned money on. Loud budgeting turns that on its head.
Yeah, no, I like that. I applaud that. I think it's about time.
Janet Gray is a financial planner with Money Coaches Canada. She says there's a lot of pressure on young people to spend beyond their means. Loud budgeting can make it easier to say no.
I like the fact that people are kind of taking back that power and saying, I'm going to spend it loudly the way I want to do it to get to the ends that I want to achieve.
But being too open about your finances, especially on social media, can come with risks. Jane Arnett is with Checkpoint Software, a cybersecurity company. She says she likes the idea of loud budgeting, but worries that people may be putting too much out there.
Where we have to be a little more careful is when we start saying what we are saving up for or what we are doing, because it creates an opportunity for a bad actor to use that information either for a really targeted spear phishing attempt to steal your information, to steal your money, to steal your identity, or just to harass you.
Let's say you're saving up for a house. You could be targeted with ads promising low mortgage rates, which are actually phishing attempts. So when it comes to sharing, Jane has this advice.
Keep it vague.
Melanie Trottier says she's pretty careful about what she posts online. And when it comes to loud budgeting, the pros outweigh the cons.
I think a lot of people can relate to not feeling very good about their finances in our current economy and situation. So I think it helps to kind of see someone else go through highs and lows and to recognize that it's all a learning journey.
For the Cost of Living, I'm Ellis Cho.
When was the last time you Googled something? Like 5 minutes ago? We know Google is so ubiquitous, it's a verb. But did it come by this ubiquitousness? Try saying that 10 times fast. Fairly. A U.S. judge has ruled no. Google is a monopoly. It's been paying potential competitors to make sure that when we open up a web browser, like Safari, what we see is Google. This court ruling is being called a landmark decision. So what could it mean for how we use the internet and beyond? Matt Stoller is the research director at the American Economic Liberties Project. He also writes a newsletter called Big, which tracks the monopoly power of big companies. Hello.
Hey.
Hey, Matt, so can you explain why the judge ruled that Google is a monopoly?
Yeah, so I think it requires a little bit of backstory because, everybody uses Google and it's a good search engine, right? And so it's like pretty easy to think, oh, well, if there were a better search engine, I could use it, right? Google used to, they used to say competition is a click away. But what the judge found is that there's something unique about search engines and digital markets more broadly, which is that the quality of the product is in part dependent on how many people use it. So if I make a search engine and somebody uses it, I can then, and I know what they search for something and they click on it, I can then tweak my search engine the next time somebody searches that term to make it better. And you get enough people using your search engine and enough data, and your search engine gets really good. Now, that's why Google's search engine is so good. They have so many people and so much data. Now, the reason they don't have competitors of any kind of quality is because no one else can get users and data. And the reason is because Google pays partners like Apple or Mozilla or Verizon or whoever, people who would preset a search engine to only package Google search with their phones and to not package any other rival. So the claim is that the judge found that this is unlawful behavior, that Google is thwarting rivals from putting their search engines in front of people, and therefore taking getting enough users and enough data to make their search engines good so that they can compete. And this has the effect of fostering a monopoly that Google now has over search engines. And because search engines are so important to advertising, they can just raise prices on advertisers. And that's why they're worth $2 trillion.
This court decision, this ruling, has been called a landmark decision. Do you agree that it's that significant?
Yeah, so politically, there's sort of an attempt to say, oh, this is just about business, just the technical thing. This is very like preset defaults, blah, 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 wonky, wonk, wonk. This is really about who controls our society, right? Because this is the first major case against a big tech firm, but really against any big business brought by the Department of Justice in 25 years, since the Microsoft case. And the question here is fundamentally, do we allow a small group of people to control the internet, right? That's the question. Do we allow, they're at Google and all the revenue or a lot of the revenue that comes out of the internet. And that is a question about what kind of society we want to live in. More fundamentally, this kind of behavior that Google is engaging in is engaged in by big businesses with gatekeeping power across the economy. So this precedent will matter for all of those businesses. So it's really a question about, are we going to allow a small group of people in every single industry to control that industry, to govern that industry, to operate as a private government? Or are we going to say, no, corporate power has to be checked by competition, and we are going to have the liberty to ply our trade independent of some private gatekeeper?
Okay, we got to dig into that a little bit more, Matt, because when you say this case is really about who controls our society, or at the very least who controls the internet, that is a huge claim, and I know you explained it a little bit there, but can you explain a little bit more why you think it's that fundamental, why this court ruling and why what's happening right now is that fundamental to society?
Yeah, I mean, Google has Google knows more about us in many ways than we know about ourselves, right? We ask Google everything. And that's an enormous amount of power. And I'll just give you one example of how this power is the power over life and death in some cases. So a couple of years ago, Google was found to be selling search advertising to rehab clinics, drug rehab clinics, in the midst of an opioid epidemic that were put there by rehab clinics that were not credible or were scummy or would take people's money and not really help them. And Google was making a lot of money off of these ads, and people were going to these rehab clinics because they trust Google. And if you think about that, all of the services that you use and you look for on Google, all of the questions that you get answered on Google, all of the ways that Google intermediates, all of their different tools from Gmail to YouTube, they have so much control over our society. Like just today, it came out, for example, in the Financial Times that Google and Meta have been collaborating to try to target under 18-year-olds with certain forms of advertising, which is illegal. And, what we're seeing is this choice, right, of over the last 30, 40 years to not enforce anti-monopoly laws has consolidated power into the hands of a small group of companies. Google is one of them. Every company, every publisher, everyone, their homepage is really Google. And that's the expression in marketing. It's like everybody starts at the Google homepage to figure out where they're going to go next. So Google is this chokehold on how we experience this incredibly important digital part of our lives.
Okay, now we have this court ruling, this decision. What are the next steps? What does Google have to do now, or what happens to Google now?
Okay, so now that Google has been found liable, they've violated the law, they're an illegal monopolist, we're going into what's called the remedy phase. And the remedy could be anything, right? It could be breakups, it could be sharing data, it could be just eliminating these contracts. There's lots of possibilities.
And when you say breakups, that means like Google search engine split out from Android, split out from whatever its other business lines are?
Yeah, correct. You could say Google. So Google owns Android, so they own a lot of the mobile phone software. Not the non-Apple stuff. That's all the operating system owned by Google. They bought that in 2005. So the judge could say, okay, now you've got to sell that line of business. It's going to be an independent business because you've been using that business to preload your search engine, and we think that's a structural problem. So that would be one kind of breakup. They could also say, all of this data that you got is ill-gotten data, and so you're going to have to delete it, or you're going to have to share it with rivals so that they can make search engines or AI tools, because that's the technological inflection point that can rival yours, because this data is ill-gotten.
So in the U.S., Federal Trade Commissioner Lena Khan seems to be getting more aggressive about taking on anti-competitive practices. Here in Canada, we have our Competition Bureau. They look like they're getting friskier. What is happening here, Matt? Why do the regulators seem to be sort of looking at this and approaching this differently in the last couple of years?
I think there's an awareness that the small number of people that are controlling our experience of these digital platforms really are the pace setters, but in lots of other areas, it is not appropriate to be governed with a small group, like of unaccountable actors. It is causing lots of problems, from shortages in, this is in other areas. There are drug shortages, there are significant shortages during COVID. There's price fixing going on in Canadian supermarkets, so people are mad about that. Like, there's a ton of inappropriate behavior, and I think worldwide people are waking up to it. And part of this is because I think there were votes for Donald Trump and for populists, and it's pretty clear people are mad about something. I'm part of a movement of people who have been making this argument. Hey, the thing that's wrong is that you have this consolidation of power in the commercial sector, and you don't think of it as politics because it seems like business, but actually this is really political power. And I think that that's actually resonated. I mean, most people get that it's really the big companies that are making a lot of the social decisions that we are dealing with. It's not necessarily elected officials. And we want decisions about our society to be made where we have a say, and that is not in a monopolized marketplace. That is maybe more at the polling booth. And the way to check this kind of authoritarian monopoly power is through competition, and that's why I think Canada updated their competition laws. We're seeing updates of competition laws across the world. It's a political reaction to this concentration of power.
What happens if this battle doesn't go the way you want it to, or it doesn't go the way you think it should? What does losing this battle against monopolies look like?
I think what we'll see is kind of more increasing amounts of authoritarian politics, and because I think people, when they get used to being bossed around in their lives in one area like commerce, then being bossed around in politics doesn't look very different than their actual life. So they have no more faith in democracy. So I think you'd see, broadly speaking, you'll kind of see the slow death of democracy. I mean, you'll still have elections, but people will just kind of be like, it doesn't matter. You'll see apathy and more kind of political violence, that kind of thing. I mean, long term. And our lives will, in the short term, our lives will just get worse, right? We'll have more constraints. There will be more ads, more, the internet will look more and more like a casino, more tracking. Like things will just kind of be shittier. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Things will just be worse.
All right, Matt Stoller, it's a big ruling. It's a complicated one. Thanks for taking us through it.
Hey, thanks so much.
That was Matt Stoller. He's the research director at the American Economic Liberties Project. He also writes a newsletter called Big, which tracks the monopoly power of big companies. That's all for this week. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary, and if you're looking for one more way to listen to the show, you can stream live radio on the CBC News app. You can also get a bunch of news on the News app, so hey, News app, check it out. The show is produced by Danielle Nerman, Ellis Cho, and Jennifer Keene, with help from Caroline Ferris. I'm Paul Habersrud. Thanks for listening.